I love you. I'll keep them safe.
Before we ride into this heart-wrenching Western saga, make sure to subscribe to Stories Hub Official and ring the notification bell so you never miss a story that touches the deepest parts of the human spirit. Eliza Mayfield always feared her husband Harlan Creed's violent temper, but when she delivered a healthy baby girl in the remote ranch cabin, his rage erupted like a summer storm over the barren plains. Harlan had demanded a son to carry on his name and work the cattle, and the moment he saw the tiny girl, he backhanded Eliza across the face with brutal force, calling her worthless and broken. Bleeding and clutching her newborn, Eliza was dragged through the mud by her hair as Harlan cursed her, finally casting them both into a rocky ravine and riding away without a backward glance. She lay there for hours, her body battered and her spirit shattered, singing a faint lullaby to the crying infant nestled against her chest while the mountain wind howled around them. High above, a solitary mountain man named Jonah Blackwood was checking his trap lines when a sound drifted up that stopped him cold, the pitiful wail of a newborn in the wilderness. Jonah followed the cry down into the ravine where he discovered a woman covered in blood and bruises, barely conscious, protecting a tiny bundle with the last of her strength under a cold gray sky. Without hesitation, the giant of a man wrapped them both in his thick fur coat, lifted them as if they weighed nothing, and carried them up the steep slope toward his hidden cabin on the ridgeline. By the time he laid Eliza on his own bed and stoked the fire, her pulse was weak, and he spent the entire night cleaning her wounds and warming the baby with heated stones wrapped in flannel. For 3 days she drifted in and out of fevered dreams, and Jonah never left her side, feeding the infant goat's milk with a rag and whispering assurances that she was safe now in the high country. When Eliza finally opened her eyes, the first thing she saw was a burly, bearded stranger holding her daughter with the gentleness of a spring breeze, humming a mountain tune she didn't recognize. Tears streamed down her face as she tried to speak, but Jonah simply handed her the baby and told her that no one would ever hurt either of them again under his watch. Over the following weeks, Eliza healed slowly, and she learned that Jonah was a former soldier who had lost his own wife and unborn child to a cholera outbreak years ago, retreating into the mountains to escape the grief. He never asked her for anything but her trust, and day by day she began to smile again as the tiny girl she named Hope giggled at the swaying pines outside the cabin door. Jonah built a sturdy cradle from pine wood and carved little bears along the rails, and Eliza realized that this quiet man was pouring all the love he had stored up into their shattered lives. As spring melted the snow, Eliza found herself laughing freely for the first time in years, helping Jonah tend the garden and learning to shoot a rifle with a confidence she'd long forgotten she possessed. One evening, sitting on the porch while Hope slept, Jonah turned to Eliza and asked if she would consider staying not as a guest but as a partner to build a life that defied the cruelty she'd escaped. Eliza's heart swelled with an emotion she thought had died in that ravine, and she placed her hand in his, whispering that this mountain man had called her his own from the moment he lifted her from the cold. Their bond deepened into a tender love that filled the cabin with warmth, and Jonah began calling Hope our daughter without a second thought, his eyes bright with the pride of a true father. However, the peace was shattered one afternoon when a dust-covered rider appeared on the trail. It was Harlan Creed, come to reclaim his property after hearing rumors that Eliza had survived and was living with a trapper. Harlan dismounted with a sneer, demanding that Eliza return with him and bring his child, claiming he needed a son but could still make use of a daughter in the kitchen of his ranch house. Jonah stepped in front of Eliza and the baby with a calm that rumbled like distant thunder, telling Harlan to leave the mountain and never speak their names again if he valued his own hide. Harlan laughed and drew his revolver, but before he could cock the hammer, Jonah's massive hand closed around the gun and crushed the cylinder with a strength born from years of hauling logs and game. The defeated brute stumbled backward, and Jonah informed him that the sheriff in the nearest town had already been notified of the attempted murder, and a posse was riding out to arrest him at that very moment. Harlan's face went pale as a distant cloud of dust rose on the horizon, and true to Jonah's word, a sheriff and 3 deputies appeared, placing Harlan in irons for what he had done to Eliza and her child. With Harlan headed for prison, the mountain community learned of Eliza's ordeal, and instead of shunning her for birthing a girl, they brought gifts of food and hand-sewn blankets to celebrate her new family. The sheriff himself tipped his hat to Jonah and declared that a real man measures his worth by the love he gives, not the gender of a child, a statement that rippled through the entire territory. Later that summer, Jonah and Eliza stood before a traveling preacher under a canopy of aspen trees, their vows witnessed by a few rugged neighbors and little Hope giggling in a basket of pine cones. Eliza wore a dress she stitched from flour sacks dyed with wild indigo, and Jonah had never seen anything more beautiful as the sun set the mountains ablaze behind his bride. That night, around a bonfire, Jonah took Eliza's hand and confessed that finding her in that ravine had saved his own life as much as hers, filling the hollow in his soul with purpose and love. The years unfolded like the gentle petals of the wild roses Eliza planted around the cabin, and Hope grew into a spirited girl who could track a deer and recite poetry her mother taught her by lantern light. Jonah taught his daughter to ride, to respect the land, and to never let anyone tell her she was less because she was born female, lessons she carried with a fierce and joyful pride. Every market day in town, the sight of the gentle giant mountain man carrying his laughing daughter on his shoulders, with his wife walking beside him, became a symbol of the truest frontier love. People who had once pitied Eliza for birthing a girl now looked upon her family with envy, for they had built a life rooted in mutual respect and an unshakable bond that no cruelty could break. When a neighboring family's son mocked Hope for being a girl who couldn't handle cattle, Jonah simply taught her how to rope a steer, and she outdid the boy in front of the entire town with a triumphant grin. Eliza, once wounded so deeply she could barely speak, became a woman known for her wisdom, often counseling other isolated wives that a child is a blessing regardless of what a cruel world might say. On Hope's 10th birthday, Jonah gifted her a journal bound in leather and told her to write her own story, a story that would begin with a mother who never gave up and a mountain man who chose love over emptiness. As the 3 of them sat on the porch watching the stars, Eliza whispered to Jonah that his love had erased every scar on her heart and given her a life she'd never dared to dream possible. Jonah simply pulled her close and replied that seeing her wounded in that ravine for birthing a girl had ignited a fire in him to prove that the greatest strength is found in protecting the innocent with tenderness. The legend of the mountain man who called a broken woman and her baby his own spread through the hollers and valleys, becoming a bedtime story for children who needed to believe in hope and happy endings. Years later, Hope would write the tale herself, and it became a cherished account in the annals of Western lore, reminding all who read it that a person's value is never determined by another's prejudice. When Jonah passed peacefully in old age, surrounded by Eliza and a grown Hope with children of her own, the whole territory mourned the man who had shown them what a father's heart truly meant. Eliza lived long enough to see her great-grandchildren, and she never stopped telling the story of the mountain man who had lifted her from the ravine and called her his own when the world had abandoned her. This narrative, born from the hardships of frontier life, teaches us that love can heal wounds no medicine can touch, and that families are forged not by blood, but by the courage to stand by one another. If this tale of redemption and mountain love resonated with you, take a second to give this video a thumbs up and share it with someone who needs to hear that true strength wears a gentle face. We want to know your favorite moment. Did you feel the chill when Jonah confronted Harlan? Or did the image of little Hope's laughter warm your soul? Tell us in the comments below. Your stories and reflections inspire us to keep creating heartfelt legends. So don't be shy. Every comment lights up the Stories Hub official community like a lantern in the wilderness. Make sure you're subscribed and have that notification bell set to all, because we've got many more powerful Western tales riding toward you over the next horizon, and you won't want to miss a single one. Remember, the world needs more mountain men and women who see a wounded soul and offer a hand rather than a fist. And every like and share spreads that message further across the frontier of hearts. Thank you for riding along with us today. Until next time, may your own story be filled with the kind of love that calls you its own, even when the world leaves you wounded. And keep believing in second chances.